Okay, so if the Megazord runs on solar powered, how come Rita hasn't done this before or after in Zord fights? Hey everyone, and welcome to another Ranger Rant. I'm Archer9234, and today I'll be discussing episode 17 from the first season of Power Rangers, titled Green with Evil Part 4. Now, this episode is adapted from Zyuranger episode 20, which is a very rarity actually. All the Green with Evil parts are actually adapting episodes in sequence. Usually whenever we're adapting Super Sentai, a lot of times we'll adapt shows out of sequence. Some episodes will be done either before, by using previous footage, or sometimes episodes will be used later on for later episodes. We usually don't follow the correct sequence order. Now the episode starts off where we left off, where we saw Goldar is actually destroying the city and trying to lure out the Rangers. Now if you've seen this episode on the re-airing of Jetix TV, most of the beginning portion is actually edited out. You don't actually see what Goldar is destroying because he's destroying cities and actually killing people. And what's even worse, Green with Evil Part 4 is usually not aired all that often. A lot of times Jetix would simply air 1, 2, and 3 and then go right to 5. So while the Rangers are watching Goldar destroy the city, they can't wait any longer and actually are going to morph. This is one of the few times we actually get to see the entire, morphing sequence outside of the morph. Because normally in MMPR we just go to the backhand and they morph. Out of all 3 seasons of MMPR, we only saw this 4 times. But unfortunately, when they try to morph, all of a sudden the power morph is just shorted out and blew out. And then all of a sudden we see the command centers, the lights are flashing, lights are not working. And when Alpha goes and tries to check what's going on, we found out that when they try to morph, all of a sudden there was some huge power drop when they try to morph, because they're trying to locate Zordon, and the power morphs were drawing too much power, so everything had shorted out. So unfortunately, this delayed the Rangers in order to getting Goldar. Now, the main reason why this happened in the episode was because they had a delay for time. Now, unfortunately, in the original Zyuranger episode, a lot of footage was unable to be used, mainly because a lot of the footage was out of suit, so they couldn't actually show a lot of footage, and also because Burai was not really in this episode till the very end. So while the Rangers are stuck in the command center, we actually go to the youth center, and we see that Goldar's attack on the city is actually, causing earthquakes and other form of stuff, and we see that, Ernie is actually evacuating the youth center, and of course we get this little moment where Bulk is trying to eat his ice cream, and Skull is trying to tell him to get out of there because the place is falling apart. And of course, Bulk doesn't want to listen, even though it's totally stupid. It's like, it's a bowl of ice cream. Just go outside and eat it, and it's your lives. When Bulk and Skull get out of the youth center, all of a sudden they're saying, oh, we should take the youth center bus. Since when does the youth center have a bus? I mean, it's a youth center that, caters to people in the gym, gymnastics, martial arts, and of course, it's a mini restaurant / just food court. But how come they would have a bus? They don't have any specific team. This really came out of nowhere. So we head back to the command center, and we see that, Alpha's trying to figure out what they can do in order to fix the morphing grid and dealing with locating Zordon, when Billy, tries to do some suggestions and opens one of the command center's computer panels up, and I assume he just simply hot wires and cross connects certain things in order to boost power. But this scene doesn't really make any sense, because by my basic understanding is that Alpha was saying that the morphing grid was drawing too much power away from searching for Zordon, because again, Zordon is lost in alternate dimensions and a lot of power must be used in order to locate him. So when they try to morph, everything just blew out. What Billy was basically doing was trying to cross-connect anything. So if you don't have sufficient power to begin with, where did that extra boost of power come from? It really isn't explained that well. It was just basically waste time because they had to deal with less footage of the Japanese episode. Eventually, Billy's wire filling around finally fixes the situation, and the Rangers are finally able to morph, and they finally head down to Angel Grove and actually fight some putties and Scorpina for a little bit. And while this is going on, we see that Bulk and Skull are driving away inside the bus, but all of a sudden Goldar picks up the bus and brings it toward the beach. Now this is part of the master plan that Rita was setting up. She's basically trying to lure the Rangers out in order to use the Megazord and trick it in order to finally destroying it. So Goldar uses whatever means possible in order to get the Rangers to use the Megazord. Now for the most part, this is what happened in the Zyuranger episode. They did a similar fashion, basically trick the Zyurangers in order to call out Daijujin. When the Rangers finally arrive on the beach area, this is one of the few times we actually get to use the US suits in the series, because normally they're always using Japanese footage because, again, this costs a lot of money and it just takes a lot of time. But in this case, they had to use it because in this case, in the Zyuranger episode, while this was going on, they were actually powered down. They were not in the suits at this point in time, and they were basically arguing with Bandora and everyone over there. Now, here comes the biggest problem with this scene. Now, Goldar blatantly says that, I think these are your friends, Bulk and Skull, and this should have immediately flagged Bulk and Skull as saying, wait a minute, the Rangers know us and they're friends? They should have simply put 2 and 2 together and automatically thought, those are the 5 guys that we know and bother in school. So this moment in time was always annoying to me because, again, they would have known their identities right and then and there. But in this case, it's just totally ignored, and I don't understand why Bulk and Skull don't pick up on this. Now, another thing I particularly don't like about the scene was because there was a whole bunch of delaying going on. If you notice during the whole beach scene, we do get these fun little moments with Bulk and Skull basically trying to avoid saying death, so they always say other words. In the end, it's being, their funny selves. But the problem with the scene is that everything was being delayed and taking forever. I mean, if you notice it, the Rangers are just standing there on the beach looking up where the bus is and just doing nothing. They're just simply gasping, saying, oh no, and just frankly not doing anything. And it doesn't really make any perfect sense. The reason why this happened was because in the original Jew Ranger episode, this scene was much, much more shorter. Basically, the Rangers arrive at the beach scene, they're not in their suits, and they're arguing with Pandora because they know this is a trap in order to get Daijujin destroyed, and they're trying to decide, should they let the people die or should they risk sacrificing Daijujin? But they had to extend the scene, so it didn't really make any sense why it was taking so long. And of course, to top it off, Goldar's interaction between the MMPR US footage was limited because, again, they couldn't use the Jew Ranger footage. So they had to basically splice the footage together poorly. So while the Rangers are arguing with Rita and dealing with Bulk and Skull, we head back to the command center and we see that Alpha's having much more progress in locating Zordon to the point where he's actually communicating with him again and is trying to tell him, I'm located here and here, and lock on the coordinates here, when all of a sudden the Green Ranger pops in. This kind of confused me though, because the Green Ranger comes back into the command center without any problems. It really didn't make any sense. They know that the Green Ranger has a power coin, so why did they allow him to come back into the command center? Again, the reason why this happened was because, again, in the Jew Ranger episode, Borai was not really used until the end of the episode, so the US writers had to figure out what to do with the character in the meantime. And now, of course, unfortunately, the Green Ranger shorts out Alpha again, and of course, starts fiddling with the control panels and finally gets rid of Zordon again. And here's another confusing part with this moment. Now, in the first part, the Green Ranger destroys the entire command center. How come he doesn't do it here? He simply just fiddles with dials and loses the connection to Zordon. But wouldn't it have been more easier to simply destroy the command center again and just leave again? It really didn't make any sense. Eventually, we head back to the beach area and we see that the Rangers are going to basically screw it and simply summon the Zords, because basically Rita was going to simply send the bus over no matter what, which they should have simply thought about before and simply summoned the Zords. Just as Bulk and Skull's bus falls down, the Megazord catches it and puts it back on the ledge. Now, I always never liked this scene the most because, again, whenever the Megazord has to hold things, the power sword, people, objects that are small. Now you actually see the stunt double's hand in some side and just basically a single glove, which is totally ridiculous. Now, since the Megazords finally formed, Rita finally executes her plan. Goldar's already big. He begins his fight with the Megazord, and eventually we see that Scorpina is going to join in the fight. Here comes a confusing thing with Scorpina. For whatever reason, when Scorpina grows big, she transforms into a full scorpion monster, which really doesn't make any sense. And this happens also in Jew Ranger. There's really no explanation why this happens, but my personal guess is due to a gender issue, because again, if Scorpina's actress was fighting the Megazord and the Megazord was punching her in the face, everyone would cry foul because it's not appropriate for a guy, even though it's a robot, to punch a woman. While Goldar and Scorpina are fighting the Megazord, we see that Rita is finally starting her spell, and we're seeing that a solar eclipse is happening right now. And this is where we get revealed that the Megazords run off solar powered. This really killed all future episodes of the Megazord usage. The problem is, it's a cool idea that the Megazord is run on solar power. But what happens when they're in a fight during nighttime? Does it become useless? And also, how come this plan was never repeated over the course of the rest of the series? Because I mean, if it's solar powered and it weakens the Megazord so much, how come they don't just simply do this in every future fight to make it weaken and make the Megazord totally useless? The same thing happens actually in Jew Rangers. The same story plot point is actually in Jew Rangers. The Daijujin does run off solar power energy. While the Megazord is having a hard time fighting off Goldar and Scorpina, we head back to the command center and we see that Tommy is nearly completed in order disconnecting the command center to Zordon. When all of a sudden Alpha wakes up and find out that Alpha's backup systems have kicked in, which was actually cool. So I assume Billy upgraded Alpha in order to have an emergency system to restore him. But they should have thought of locking the command center out from the 6th power coin. Fortunately enough, Alpha was quick enough and actually trapped Tommy inside a force field to contain him inside the command center while Alpha was trying to reconnect to Zordon. But unfortunately, since Tommy was screwing around with the controls, Zordon again was lost. Again, we head back to the Megazord fight and we see that Rita is going to enact her second phase of the fight and actually breaks the Green Ranger out of the containment field in the command center and actually sends him to the battlefield. Goldar and Rita actually knew the Green Ranger was stuck inside a force field, field. That really didn't make any sense because how would Rita and Goldar know that the Green Ranger was stuck inside a force field? And once the Green Ranger arrives on the battlefield, Rita casts her magic spell again and makes the Green Ranger grow. For the very first time, we actually see a Ranger at the size of a Megazord. Now, personally, I never really liked this. Yes, it's cool that the Green Ranger was actually the same size as the Megazord, but the problem is since we're so used to seeing the Rangers as, normal scaled people, and when you see the Green Ranger next to the Megazord, your mind always goes back to say, the Megazord is really a guy in a suit, and it basically kind of breaks that wall where you kind of accept the Megazord as being a giant robot. Unfortunately though, the Megazord is totally outmatched. I mean, this is probably the first time the Megazord is actually fighting 3 people, and in a last ditch effort, Jason tries to call the Power Sword in order to give the Megazord an extra boost, but unfortunately it doesn't work. And the Megazord unfortunately is knocked down and all the Rangers are ejected. And when we see that the Megazord actually is being destroyed and being swallowed up into the ground. Now this particular scene, while emotional, doesn't really make any particular sense. If you listen to all the dialogue of the Rangers, everyone's basically, horrified because they're seeing the Megazord being destroyed and everything is being wiped out. Now, the problem is in the original Zyuranger episode, Daijujin wasn't being destroyed. What was happening was Daijujin was being resealed into the ground. That's the reason why the Zords were all separated individually and being sucked up into the ground. Because if you guys remember, the Zords come from underground, so why would lava affect them? So eventually we head back to the command center and we see that all the Rangers have regrouped into the command center. Of course, everyone is totally bummed out, depressed, and everyone is horrified because all the Zords have been destroyed. Now, there was a little goof up in the scene. If you listen closely, Kimberly actually says Megazords instead of Zords. She kind of screwed up. Now, of course, at this point in time, 4 of the Rangers are fed up with the situation, and they all think it's over. And even Billy says it's a 10% chance that they'll ever be able to locate Zordon again. While, of course, Jason gives his big speech since he's the leader, and you should not give up no matter what, even if we have this small chance. When all of a sudden the command center's panels start beeping off, the computer finally knows who the Green Ranger is, thanks to the Green Ranger being trapped inside the force field, and the computer's doing diagnostics on him. And this is where the Rangers finally get their big reveal of who their Green Ranger finally is. Now, overall, I have to give the episode a 2 out of 5. I particularly hated this episode. I consider it the worst episode out of the entire 5-part arc. The main reason was because, again, the Green Ranger didn't have anything to do. The story wasn't handled at all. While we do get these cool moments because finally, after 3 parts, Bulk Skull are featured mostly in this part, and we also have lives being risked, and we also get the major reveal of the Green Ranger in this episode. The problem is the pacing of the episode. The Rangers not rescuing Bulk Skull right away, they were simply procrastinating. Rita's convoluted plan didn't really make any sense. How come the Green Ranger went into the command center? That wasn't really set up. And of course, the confusing ending with the destruction of the Megazord at the end, when in part 5, all of a sudden the Megazord is okay and fine, which doesn't really make any sense. What do you guys personally think about this episode? Do you think it was good and on par with the other 3 parts of the episode, or do you agree with me that it basically felt like a filler episode and things didn't really make any sense with the beach scene? What do you guys personally think? Of course, leave your comments below on what you think about this episode, and of course, leave your comments below on what future episodes you would like me to review. For next week's episode, I'll be continuing the final part in the Green with Evil saga, Green with Evil Part 5. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys right back here next week.